11 for body. Okay.
Yes. Aha.
Got a little timer action going here, Dave. Just be patient.
Hmm.
15 seconds. And that's 30.
You're on commercial, but try your other glasses.
Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, 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 everyone. Tonight, I have something extra special for you. Our guest tonight is David Lafleche. He is a retired computer systems developer and artist, a Canadian polycystic kidney disease patient who also suffers from multiple sclerosis. He is currently seeking a preemptive kidney transplant, a transplant before going on dialysis. However, his GFR is nearing a point where a decision has to be made soon. That's why this broadcast is important. Please share this broadcast so David can get his living donor. David was initially diagnosed with multiple sclerosis and polycystic kidney disease in his early 20s. David did not have much support. His medical team did not give him very much information. However, after he graduated from college, majoring in business and computer science, he made investments in the market and real estate to help act as seed money for other projects. After a point in time, David slowly realized that despite his limitations, he could continue to pursue his dreams with a career in computer systems. He would not allow PKD to limit his life. His life changed for the better after meeting his future wife, Irene, around the age of 40. Golf and traveling have played an important role in their lives. Success in their initial careers have allowed them to pursue other interests. David is currently working as an artist, and his work can be seen at paintingsbylafleche.com. You'll see in the comments to the original post to this broadcast on my personal page on Facebook. All the links I'm going to talk to you about tonight are there. A couple of biographical stories about David are there. Just about anything I could find on the net. You know your Uncle Jim. So if you're interested in buying a painting from David, just click on the link in the comments and you can find it. David is seeking a live donor, and you can help. You can share this broadcast. You can share his kidney page on Facebook. It's called David Lafleche Kidney Campaign. The link to that likewise is in the comments. David is currently listed for a kidney transplant at the Iowa Hospital Living Kidney Donor Program. Their phone number, 613-738-8400. That's 613-738-8400, extension 82719, extension 82719. And by the way, all this information will be streaming across the stream during the course of our broadcast as well. So plenty of ways to find David. Please, when you call in, please mention David Lafleche by name. Last name, Lafleche. All right, so we got to have a correct spelling. We don't want the kidney to go to the wrong David, okay? So at any rate, about his hospital, they tell us that about half of their patients receive a kidney from a living donor from their program or as part of the kidney paired exchange program. So that's remarkable. Those are some very, very, very encouraging numbers. Currently, he is following a strict exercise and diet regimen to achieve his goal of a preemptive kidney transplant. David remains hopeful, very, very hopeful of finding a living donor. We need a living donor, folks. So look, when you share this on your personal page too, to your friends. If you have friends in Canada, share it to your Canadian buddies, all right? Because we need to find David a living transplant. He continues to take steps on his own to find a donor. So we're going to talk about the Canadian kidney transplant system tonight and some of David's advocacy efforts. Please give a warm welcome. Come on, Jim, you can talk. Warm welcome to our friend, David Lafleche. David, how are you doing tonight?
Very well, thank you. Hi, everybody. Thank you, Jim, for inviting me to be on this broadcast. I certainly appreciate it. That's wonderful. Doing very well tonight. Thank you.
No problem at all. Did I state everything correctly in the introduction?
Absolutely, accurately and correctly. Yes, indeed. I think that pretty much summarizes the whole thing. So thank you very much, and good night, everyone.
No, not yet. Don't go away yet. Tell us a little bit about where you grew up, your educational background, and your employment history.
Well, sure. I pretty much grew up in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada, for most of my life. Although I was actually born in Goose Bay, Labrador. That's because my father was stationed there. He was in the Air Force at the time. And it just so happened that he was only stationed there for a short while, but that's when my mother decided that she would deliver me. So for the rest of my life, I have a birth certificate that says Goose Bay, Labrador, the province of Newfoundland. And it's interesting that people, anytime they find out I was born there, they're always asking me, what is it like? What was it like to grow up or to live in Newfoundland? And then I have to remind everybody, well, I was only there for the first 2 months of my life, so I don't think I really know a great deal about it. But because shortly after that, after a few months, we moved back to Ottawa. So I've lived here pretty much my entire life. And of course, I went. Sorry. I went to college here as well. I studied, as you mentioned, business and computer systems. It was a 3-year program, really kind of business administration. It took a lot of the business side studies, marketing, management, accounting, business law, all that sort of thing. And then on the other side, because I majored in computer science and, we took all of, computer development, computer design, all of that sort of thing. Really, I got into that program because I saw it as an expedient sort of, fairly quick way to get into the workforce, into the computer field, which was what I was really shooting to do, so I could raise money as quickly as possible for other ideas, other ventures that I had in mind. I really never saw myself at that point, working for my whole career in computers. I just thought that I would, it'd be a great way to start raising capital and funds so that I could put into the business ideas that I had in mind. But which worked out well, because as soon as I graduated, it didn't take very long. Almost right afterwards, I got a job in the private sector, in a private corporation, Data Crown Corporation, as a programmer. So that it met its purpose to get me moving in that direction. But of course, as I was saying, in my longer term ambitions, I always saw myself with a bit of an entrepreneurial spirit. I saw that I was going to. And now, whether I was going to start a business necessarily in computers or something else, I hadn't really decided. I don't think at that point, but I just knew that it was going to be something, going kind of independent in some direction. So, we're working in the private corporation, is pretty demanding and so on. And so I thought at that point, after I worked there for a while, then I thought, I think I'll move over to the government, because it seemed to me that was probably a better fit, or a better balance. The government has, how shall I say, maybe more of a reliable, structured work environment. I could count on, kind of a 9-to-5 environment, maybe a little bit of overtime, this and that. But I knew that, I wouldn't be working 7/24, and there would be an extra time available to for my other pursuits to carry on with that. It's interesting when I think about the first assignment that I had at Data Crown. I was there for a couple of days. I think it was a couple of days, Well, actually, no, I was there for a couple of days, and then they shipped us off to Muskoka Sands for a little resort thing. I guess that was their annual. But when we got back, I was only there for a couple of days, and they said, "Well, look, David, we have this client who has a requirement, and I'd like to go over there and have a chat with these people and find out what it's all about, write up their requirements, maybe throw a couple of data models, a couple of process models together, do a little cost estimating, sort of, figure it out, scope it out for us, and, come back and, give us an idea of where we're going with this project." So here I am, scared little guy, first time, this major corporation. I'm thinking, okay, great. So boss, how much time do I have for this? In the back of my mind, I'm thinking, well, you're going to give me a couple of months or something, right? To scope this out. And everything goes, well, no, well, show us maybe what you got by next week. Show us what you got next week. But, oh my God, are you kidding? So, there you are. And so you're thinking, well, there goes the old 9 to 5 idea and time to work on something else. So it's, that was around the clock to get something put together. And, so that sort of led me to the idea that maybe the government was a better fit if I had other ambitions, in the background. So, but then of course, I have to admit, I didn't, so I didn't expect that I was going to be staying in the government as long as I ultimately did. But I ended up probably working for about 10 or 11 different departments in over the 30 or 35 years that I was in the government. So I do a couple of years and, kind of get bored. I think, okay, you guys are over there. What are you doing? You're working on SAP. Okay, great. Well, I'll come and join you and do a couple of years. That's okay. That's fine. And then hey, you guys are another department. You're working on PeopleSoft. Can I come over? Okay, I'll join. So I did this every year or two, kind of get bored. And so I move on, which I guguess kept it interesting, during those years that I was there, but probably to my detriment to some extent, because, you're always the new guy on the block. And so, here's David, I think people started thinking of me as a consultant instead of an employee. It's always the brand new guy. I probably should have stayed in one place longer. Then maybe that makes it easier for moving up the ladder. But it was an interesting adventure.
All right. It's my understanding that you were initially diagnosed with polycystic kidney disease and multiple sclerosis in your early 20s. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Here I was just getting out of college. I had all these ambitions and ideas and where I thought I saw my life going. And very shortly afterwards, I got hit first with the news of having multiple sclerosis. And I thought, actually, I'm trying to remember exactly. It was a long time ago, so I'm trying to remember exactly how I got diagnosed. But there's certain symptoms, of course, with MS. You can have some optic neuritis, a little blurriness, maybe some balance issues, a few things. I must have had some symptoms expressing themselves because somebody sent me ultimately for an MRI. And of course, once that MRI was done, and you start seeing all the lesions and the scars and so on the neural pathways and in your brain. I mean, it's you see the demyelination, of course, myelin being the insulation around your nerves, and that starts getting eroded, has some scars and lesions and so on. So anyway, that was detected, and it was yes, I'm sorry, David, you have MS. And I thought, okay, well that's terrific. I carried on working, thinking I'm not sure quite yet how this is going to impact me, but I'm not going to worry too much about it right away. But then within about a year, I think it was roughly about a year after that, then all of a sudden I got diagnosed with something called polycystic kidney disease. And it's a little, excuse me, I know why I got evaluated for that, because it came from my mother's side. She had obviously PKD. She in turn got it from her father. And so I guess they probably waited till I was in my early 20s, somewhere around there. And they said, you should go for an ultrasound and so on and have a look at your kidneys and whatnot. And sure enough, there were the cysts starting to develop. So there I was, so you're at that point in your life, just trying to get started. And then wham, you get hit with two life-threatening chronic diseases, or what I perceived at that time as life-threatening. I realized there's, it's not, it depends on, things like that, and you're asking your doctors, how is this going to progress? Like, And I'm asking about multiple sclerosis, and they're saying, well, we're not too sure. Well, I'm asking, can you give me an idea? Is it going to progress quickly? Am I going to be debilitated? Will I be in a wheelchair? Or, what's going to happen? Well, we don't know, David. We're not sure. There's variables. It affects different people in different ways at different times. Okay. Well, what about PKD? And what's going to happen there? Am I going to, but the major thing they told me was, well, you are going to lose your kidneys at some point, but we can't really tell you how long. And there's possibly you have the autosomal dominant version, which is a little progresses more slowly, but we're not sure about that at this point either. It could be more aggressive. And I'm thinking, okay, I guess there's not a lot to go on here. So I'll just try and deal with it as well as possible. But and I should mention, I guess, as well, I mentioned that my mother had PKD. My sister also, I have a sister, she also has PKD. But I was also, I also saw myself as a fairly typical, back then, family demographic. I guess back then they used to say, your typical family was, 2.3 kids and a white picket fence and a station wagon and that whole thing. And, I had that vision, that I was going to be successful in business and I was going to have a family and it was going to, all of that, that was the whole direction I was going to pursue. And then, having these diseases diagnosed that early, pretty much felt like having the carpet pulled out from under me twice. And that really changed things quite a bit. But, it's interesting. I just want to mention about, in my mother's case, very quickly, just want to mention that she passed away from complications of PKD about 25 years ago. Back then, she started getting very, very sick very quickly. Her disease progressed quite quickly. And of course, with a lot of women, and, the liver gets very much affected. The cysts become quite enlarged. So she had a very large liver. The kidneys were quite large. She was becoming quite deteriorated, quite sick. And, I was asking her doctors back then, well, why is she not high on the priority list, high on the criteria to get a transplant? And, they were telling me, well, she's too sick. She won't stand a transplant surgery. And I'm saying, well, yeah, no, I know that now. Back then, I said, yes, I know at this point she's too sick for that. But my question always was, why didn't we take action 2 or 3 years earlier? Why didn't you recognize how sick she was getting? And why didn't she, elevate to the highest priority, in the criteria, and we find her a kidney, and never got, all these years, never got a straight answer on that from anybody. Why did you just let her get sick? But anyway, I'm sure there must have been, maybe there's something I'm not aware of, but that was a difficult thing to try and understand why didn't she get better care? I mean, we have, it's a great system here in Canada. I mean, we, try and deal with every, each case as well as possible, but for some reason, somehow she slipped through the cracks a little bit, I think. But, it's interesting. I just want to mention one last thing on that about, getting multiple chronic I always say life-threatening diseases, but of course, here I am at this age, I'm still hanging in there. So maybe it's not quite so life-threatening, but they're very serious. The odds in Canada of getting multiple sclerosis are roughly about 1 in 400. So you say 400 to 1 in 400. No, not too bad. The odds of getting PKD you get different numbers. Some people say between 1 in 500 or 1 in 1,000 in Canada of getting that. So then you have to ask, simple math, what are the odds of getting both? And of course, then you have to multiply the denominators. If you have, let's say event A, you have a 1 in 3 chance of something, and then event B, it's 1 in 3. Well, the chance of getting both is 9 because you have to multiply the denominator. So 3 times 3. The chance of getting MS and PKD, 1 over 400 times 1 over 600 is 1 over 240,000. 240,000 to 1 of ending up in this situation. So how lucky am I? Now, if I could be that lucky in a lottery, that'd be pretty good. But unfortunately, those are the odds for this. But
okay.
Unfortunately, didn't get a lot of information from my physicians or anybody about what was happening. But we dealt with it as well as possible.
Well, I understand one of the things that they told you was that you had a 50% chance of passing this to your children, assuming that your spouse doesn't have it. Is that correct?
Absolutely, yes. You're quite right. That is probably one of the, if not, I was going to say, maybe not the only, but that was one of the key pieces of information. Yes, that I was, they told me there's definitely a 50% chance that I could pass it on, and of course that became one of the, deciding factors in not moving ahead with having a family when I was younger. Because I just didn't realize, I didn't know, of course, how things were going to turn out over the next number of years. When I was younger, I always thought I was going to be a great dad. I wanted to be a dad. I wanted to have a family. As I said, I wanted to have a business and so on. And then I thought, well, I don't know, what kind of a dad am I going to be? Am I going to be, am I going to be debilitated in some ways? Am I going to be sick from PKD? Am I going to be losing my kidney functions quickly? Is MS going to have me, suffering from other things? Am I going to be able to take my kid to the ball game, to teach him things, to play, go out and do all the things that I envisioned I would want to do as a father? And I thought, well, now there seems to be a pretty good chance, because I'm not getting a lot of information, there's a pretty good chance that I won't be able to do these things. So I pretty much gave up on the idea. And of course, again, as you pointed out, once I realized that there's a 50% chance of passing it on, well, that on top of not knowing what kind of father I would be or could be, that really closed the door for me at that point. I said, well, I guess I'm going to give up on my dreams of having a family at that point, or children. And that pretty much kind of closed the door on starting a business as well, because I thought, well, it's one thing to have a job, and I can get up, go to work, and so on, and do that. That's relatively easy. But the amount of energy and effort it takes, to run a successful business, that's like 7/24. And how much energy am I going to have? How much mobility am I going to have? Am I going to be able to actually put in that kind of effort to run a business? Well, there were just too many question marks, too many variables. So, really, it had a pretty big impact. I pretty much, I had to forego, a couple of my dreams there for a while.
Okay. What year did you graduate from school?
That was 1981. I think that was, excuse me. I shouldn't say I think. I know. Yes, that was 1981.
So your
time ago.
Diagnosis would have been approximately 1981 in that neighborhood?
Well, I would think it had to be somewhere. It was certainly the early 80s anyway. I think shortly after. Yeah, a little bit fuzzy on the exact date. I don't know why I don't know that specifically. You'd think that would be emblazoned in my brain somewhere, but it was somewhere in the early 80s.
Okay. It's my understanding that as time passed, you became more aware that PKD was really not going to interfere with your goals. Is that a fair statement?
That is a fair statement. When I was trying to get ready for preparing to raise money and capital and everything to start a business, I was a pretty ambitious little young fellow back then for a while. I was out buying real estate and so on. I think at that point, in my early 20s, I had what was it? I don't know, 4 or 5 properties in London, Ontario, not London, England. I had several properties in Edmonton on the other side of the country. I had some property in Ontario. And I started dabbling in the stock market as well. I made a couple of decent investments, and I made 1 or 2 really stupid investments. I remember losing a big pile on something. I won't even talk about that. It's embarrassingly stupid. One mistake I made. But I was really, at that point, I was really getting ready to move ahead with things. And then, as I said, I felt like I had the carpet pulled out and the kind of put a damper on everything. But then, so days kind of turn into weeks, and weeks turn into months, and months turn into years as you're working. And I'm still doing, a different job, different assignments. As I mentioned, I went to a lot of different departments. And this probably went on for, I'm talking about through my 20s, and then I got into my 30s, and maybe, you get to about mid 30s, somewhere in there, late 30s, and a light went on. I think it's like a light bulb went off and said, you know what, you're still doing okay. These diseases are not going to be as debilitating or crippling as maybe they could have been. And so, at that point I realized, wow, I probably could have pursued the things that I wanted to pursue. Maybe the foolishness of youth, I shouldn't have let it weigh on me as much as I did. But that was when I got to that point. Again in my 30s, and I realized, yeah, that's excuse me, that's it's not a death sentence, and it's not going to stop me from doing things going forward, and I really could have pursued things. Maybe I could have even had a family, because I realized I know there's a 50% chance of passing it on, but with medical advancements and the things that are research is going on and so on, my children may not have had any difficulty at all. And so there was that. It almost seemed like there was that one day, I woke up and I was like, okay, the light came on and said, you've been foolish, and you shouldn't have given up on things. And yes, it's not going to stop you from pursuing things going forward. And so of course now I've still got all new ambitions going forward. But
okay. I understand that your life changed for the much better when you met your wife, Irene. You were nearly 40. Tell me a little bit about meeting Irene.
Yeah, that was the beginning of a whole new future. I was talking about in my 30s, and so I think I was getting close to late 30s, about 39, and I met Irene, and this really opened up a lot of. It really changed a lot of things, because it really sort of paved a new path for a new direction for a new optimistic, bright new direction. Actually, we met on it was a blind golf course date. Actually, she was already a very avid golfer. I hope she doesn't mind my saying that. In a past relationship of hers, she was the person she was dating. Her father actually owned a golf course, and so he was a very accomplished golfer, and she learned to golf from him. So here I am going on this blind golf date, and she's a pretty good golfer, and I always wanted to learn to play golf. I was very much a beginner, so I was maybe I kind of exaggerated my ability a little bit there, but so I sort of said, oh yes, I can golf, no problem. I'll meet you for a golf date, and but I was. In my younger days, I was also fairly, naturally athletic. So I figured I could probably whack a ball down the field fairly well, even not really knowing what I'm doing. And she might have a different opinion about how I performed. I'm sure I may not have done the best, but I managed to get around the course anyway. And so that kind of so we had a lot of those recreational activities and things. So we had golf, and we started sharing a lot of sports and travel and activities and things together. So it really kind of reopened up a whole new sense of being alive again. And it's interesting though, because a lot of the sports that she was very good in, I played football and hockey and baseball and things like that. I'd never really played much golf, and I certainly had never played squash. And she was actually younger. At one point, she was a ranked squash player, and so she said, "Oh, great! Why don't we play some squash?" I thought, "Oh my goodness, I don't know the first. I'd be lucky if I could spell squash. I'm not sure exactly how you play this game, but." We did that for a while, and she really kept me running, obviously. But I think maybe I held my own for a while there, but she probably beat me, I'm sure. But anyway, so we had all that kind of activity and a little bit of traveling going on. Maybe not as much as I would have liked, but although we did for a number of years, we went to Florida. We rented a house in Florida every February as well, and that was great because it's so cold up here in February. And we had a little West Highland Terrier for the last 13 years. We actually had Max, little West Highland Terrier, but we had to put him down this last year. Unfortunately, he developed prostate cancer. But so for all those years that we were renting houses, we always had to find pet-friendly houses. But that just made it more of a little bit of a challenge. But we managed to find some interesting places. But even today, we do. Now we're doing a lot of cycling and running and walking and lots of activities. But actually, it's interesting. I should mention that we got married. We met in 1999. We got married in 2006. So 7 years later. So it was kind of like a reverse 7-year itch. Some people get together and they get divorced after 7 years. We got together and we got married after 7 years. So a little bit different, but. And now, of course, we both finished our first careers. Actually, she was in computers as well. We both did our 35, years in computer systems. And now along the way, we started, we're developing all kinds of new, pursuing all kinds of new activities. And this is something, again, that, meeting Irene has really kind of, reopened this thought process for me about new ambitions and new directions and things that I want to do. She, at one point, was running something called the Woolen Bear. And she had a little company that was making and selling custom knitted sweaters and these types of things. So she was running that. And now she's running another business. I think I actually gave her the idea for the name. It's a quilting business. And the little, the toucan bird, toucan. But she helps other people because she does the quilting for them. So I gave her the idea to call the company Toucan Quilt. Toucan, the spelling of the bird. So it's Toucan Quilt. Anyway, so that was kind of cute. So I give myself credit for the name for that. But anyway,
Okay.
and then while she's doing that, and now, I got into a few years ago. I guess you can see some of my paintings in the back there. I got into being an artist. I'll talk about I can talk a little bit about that later.
We're going to do that right now.
Okay.
Tell us a little bit about your second career as a painter. What kinds of things do you paint, and why painting and not something else?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think, the reason I got into painting was because at one point, this is when Irene was really getting moving, I think, with her quilting business. And I thought, okay, I better pick up something on the side, some kind of a hobby as well, to stay busy. I didn't know anything about painting. I've never had any formal lessons, or I just thought to myself one day, I knew a few painters, and so it just sort of crossed my mind. I thought, well, I wonder what it takes to be able to do that. So I walked into an art supply store, and I said, okay, well, I'm kind of interested in painting. Can you, set me up? What do I need? And they said, well, what do you want to do? What kind of painting do you want to do? And I'm thinking, well, wait a minute, what are you asking here? Oh, okay, I don't know, landscapes, cityscapes. Are you asking what it is I want to paint? They said, well, no. What kind of materials do you want to use? Do you want to paint in oil? Do you want to paint in acrylic? Do you want? And there's other materials. And I said, oh, I don't know. I have no idea. So I just asked them, well, what do most people do? What's the most common thing? And they said, well, most people paint, oil on canvas. And okay, great. Well, hand me some oils, throw me a few brushes and some canvases. And I went home, bought an easel and so on, set it up. Found a reference photo of some one locale somewhere in Europe. I forgot which one it was now. Maybe it was Gdansk, Poland. And took a crack at painting it. And next thing I know, it seemed to be a pretty decent painting. I got some positive feedback on it. And from there, that led one thing to another. Then suddenly I got involved in a number of art organizations, a member of 3 or 4 different art associations. They got me into doing exhibits and exhibitions. I got into a couple of galleries. A couple of short-term galleries, but I know a few gallery owners, and they asked me to come out and do painting live at their site, and talk to clients and so on, and sort of, walk people through the process and so on. And I thought, well, I don't know if I'm really qualified to do this because I've never even had a lesson, but I'll explain to people how I do it anyway. So just one thing kind of led to another, and next thing I know, I've got walls full of paintings, and I just finished one commission this year for somebody, and they're very happy with the work. It's always exciting when they have it hanging on their wall and they go, yeah, I love what you did. That's the big reward. And but before that, I hadn't done anything for a little while. But now I'm kind of getting excited about it again, and I think I'm going to pick up the brushes again. And even though there's other things that I want to pursue, I'm never going to sit idly by and do nothing. But I'm going to pick up the brushes again and see what I can do there as well. Okay.
And if people want to find David's painting, he's on the internet, www.paintingsbylafleche.com. So the link to that is in the comments. If you want to contact David, click on the link, go see him, commission another painting. He likes landscapes, cityscapes. Maybe we could talk him into doing a seascape sometime. Who knows?
Quite possibly.
Tell me a little bit about your interest in starting online e-commerce businesses.
Right. Well, yeah, I'm not sure exactly when that sort of hit for me, sort of clicked for me. But back in my early days when I was, getting, we talked about, raising money, capital and so on to start a business. Back then I was kind of thinking a little more brick and mortar, I suspect. I wasn't totally sure what kind of business it would be, but I think I probably was thinking more something, like a little more brick and mortar. But, then of course the years go by, things change, and technology has advanced so much. And then of course the pandemic hits. And that was, that really opened the door for online businesses. We had a number of major corporations that made it so easy, companies like Shopify and so on. I mean, having a background in computer systems is fairly simple for me to set up my own websites, which, I did for my painting. It's easy enough to set up websites and what, all the online tools that you need. But it's becoming, increasingly simple with all of the off-the-shelf packages that you can get. It's really just a question of, deciding what kind of products you want to market, and how you want to brand yourself, and so on, and then just putting it all together and getting out there and seeing what happens. It just seemed to me like the next logical approach to starting a business. Of course, now there's a lot of competition as well. I think everybody's starting an online business, so you sort of have to find that unique little niche or angle to help you stand out from the others. But it just struck me that it was a good it seemed to be a good mix of things, because I have a technical background, so setting things up online to be very simple, and it's really just deciding on the platform, the format, what products I want to sell, and so on, and then just get out there and make it happen. So it just seemed to be a good fit.
Okay, talk to us about your quest to try and find a preemptive kidney transplant. What's going on with your kidneys currently? Why do you want a transplant before dialysis? And apparently time is of the essence. Can you talk to us about that, please?
Right. Well, certainly, the whole concept of a preemptive transplant, as you know, naturally, it's, to try and, get a transplant before you reach, the critical stage of renal failure and have to go on dialysis. But, the major thing I think about, and God willing, if I'm lucky enough to get, to find an angel donor, the beautiful thing about getting a kidney is your kidneys are working 24/7, and they're a much more effective biofilter. They're much more effective filter in removing toxins and impurities and so on than a man-made filter that would be, say, in a dialysis machine. Now, luckily, and thank heavens, we have created dialysis machines, but there's certainly just no comparison in the the degree of health, I think, that you're going to have with a new kidney, and versus being on dialysis. But it simply would be wonderful to be able to avoid the whole necessity of having to go on dialysis. It's quite a, well, I don't know if I want to use the expression, a debilitating process, but you've got to have all kinds of shunts and stunts and stents and bits and pieces and, things all through your system. And you got to be chained to a machine for, X number of hours. And certainly it's not going to clean, it's not going to clean your blood as well as a natural organ. So, it's night and day. It's so much a better prognosis to find a natural living kidney, and in advance of needing dialysis. Now, again, if you don't find one in time, it's, dialysis, thank heavens that it's there and as a backup, but it would certainly be wonderful to be able to avoid that whole dialysis process altogether, if possible.
Okay. Talk to us a little bit about your current GFR and where you stand as far as either starting dialysis or kidney transplant.
Yeah, my last blood work a couple of months ago had me at about 17% eGFR. So that tends to, so there's a little bit of time there, because typically, they want you to be, a little bit lower. 12, 14, 15% or something before they're really, considering that you're getting to the critical stage. But, when I was on the original Genarch study, I was going to mention that, my nephrologist back then was always saying, we look at your graph and it sort of goes on a, sort of a consistent decline. but it could be like falling off the edge of a cliff at any time. So, it could drop from 17 to, to critical stage, or even, renal failure, very quickly. It's the sort of thing that's, it's kind of unpredictable. When you get to these last few percentage points, will it last? Will my kidney function last a few more months? Will it be another 6 months, another year? It's hard to say. But hence the whole idea of getting a preemptive transplant before it does reach that stage. It's in terms of my overall condition, though, my kidneys are certainly obviously very big. I mean, they're at 17%. Or last check, actually, my next blood work, my next assessment is next month, and we'll see if I'm still at 17 or if I've dropped. I guess knock on wood, I'd probably be pretty lucky to still be at 17%, for the next check. But back in the early days of this, we were talking about that there wasn't a lot of information about how things are going to progress, the prognosis and outcomes and progression and so on. But one piece of information that my nephrologist always told me back then was you shouldn't be too muscular, and you shouldn't be eating too much protein to build muscle. Try not. I mean, because I was fairly athletic back then, and my heaviest recorded weight was 200. I remember one time weighing at 227 pounds, and about 6 feet tall. And now maybe there was a little bit of fat in there too. I'm not too sure, but I was an awful lot more muscular back then in those early days. And so we're talking 20s, my 20s. But they said, too much protein, too much work. If you keep building all this muscle, you're going to be producing way more creatinine than you should have. That's going to be more difficult for your kidneys. So we recommend you slim down. And so for years, I stopped the heavy workouts. I stopped eating a lot of protein, and just slim down and slim down. So here we are, a few decades later, and I've gone from 227 pounds. I'm now about 165. But I'm still actually pretty fit because I still run and cycle, and I still lift a few weights and this and that. But my general condition, I'm not feeling too bad, feeling pretty good. I'm just not anywhere near as big as I used to be.
Okay.
If you compare the two of us then and now, they look like two different people.
All right. Talk to us a little bit about your formal pre-transplant assessment from the Ottawa Hospital Living Kidney Donor Program. What are they saying about your chances to transplant?
Well, it's an interesting question. I don't think I've actually had that specific feedback yet, where anybody has given me an indication of what the chances are. But because I'm just in the process of finishing all of the pre-transplant assessment tests. I've had all the cardiac perfusion tests, so they fill you with radioactive isotopes and make sure there's no defects in your heart, checking your vascular blood flow and chest x-rays to make sure there's no visible anomalies there and so on. I may have one or two more tests to do. I've pretty much completed all of them though. And what I do know is the feedback on each of those tests has been extremely positive. They're always saying, "Oh, great! We did the vascular test. Your blood flow is fine. We looked at your heart. There's no problems there. We've looked at this and that, and everything is." So, individually, as individual tests, they're saying everything is fine. But it's interesting. Nobody has actually said, "Okay, then we're going to stamp you as a green light for a transplant." But I'm sure. That's just kind of implied, I think, because everything is absolutely green light on all the tests. So I'm sure I'll be a good candidate for a transplant.
Okay. Let's talk about some of the steps that you've taken to find a living donor. It's my understanding you have a page on Facebook, David Lafleche Kidney Campaign. The link to that is in the comments. Talk to us about that and some of the other things that you've tried to do to find a living donor.
Right. I think I probably started with that social media campaign using Facebook. Started creating some posts I created a separate page, a kidney campaign page. Started and thank you to you, Jim, for all the groups that you've identified. Started joining those Facebook groups. That's really increased a lot of the reach and visibility. That's terrific. Thank you. And so I was focusing for a while, pretty much exclusively on a social media campaign, and then I started getting the idea of exploring more physical media. So I had these great big car magnets made for that you put up on my SUV, big sign as I'm driving around, says my picture and says I need a kidney, if you want to consider helping, and phone number, contact information, and so on. So my car, my SUV now is a mobile bulletin board, or for that. And then I started looking at other ideas, and so I have little, actually I've got a few things right in front of me, as a matter of fact. So then you get like little, I don't know if I can do this or not, like little tent cards and so on that, I can leave these in, which way?
Yeah, beautiful, right there.
These, sorry?
Right there, you got it right, yeah, closer to your face.
Close up, there we are.
Yeah.
Little tent cards and things that I can leave lying around in wherever, it could be health organizations, it could be hair salons, grocery stores, doesn't matter. Anybody who will take it, I can put these things down, people see it, and it gives them a chance to sort of wonder whether or not they would want to follow up on it. I've created, I'll get it right. I'll get it right eventually, closer to my face. These are more stiff little kind of flyers that I post around the city a little bit. I can put them wherever I can find a place to put, whether it's a bus stop or a post office box or whatever. I tape them up, and as people go about their normal business, they see this. So I have those kind of posters. I have other types of little flyers that I can hand out to people. It's got several pictures and more information on it. And then of course even little campaign business cards that if somebody asks a quick question, maybe, I saw the sign on your car, can you give me some information? Oh, here you go, take this. It's got the hospital phone number and contact information and next steps and everything you need to know. And even my wife and I have become kind of walking billboards as well. I'm just going to reach around here or something. I've had T-shirts made up, all kinds of different T-shirts and so on. And so as we're out cycling and walking or whatever, let's see, it might say something. This is one of mine. I'm not sure if it's good. I'm running for my life.
There you go.
Literally. And then if they look at the back of it, it says, why? Because I need a kidney. Will you help? And a phone number and so on. So we have a whole bunch of different T-shirts. My wife's would say, my husband needs a kidney, with and contact information and so on. So we've got physical material all over the place, a social media campaign, and we're actually we're living, walking billboards as well to do what we can. I also, and of course, as I said, I can't thank you enough, Jim, for everything that you've done, to help increase visibility. I also want to give credit to Jeff Robertson of the PKD Foundation of Canada. There was a time way back where we started to get a little bit involved in one of the local PKD chapters. That lasted for a while, but I'm not sure what happened to that chapter. But more recently, I've been more involved with Jeff. He's been extremely helpful, provided a lot of guidance, a lot of advice, and even physical material that brochures and things that I can hand out to people when they ask questions, to learn more about the process of donation. And actually, at one point, it was maybe a couple of years ago, one of the things that the PKD Foundation features is something called the Voices of PKD. And so they publish your individual stories on their website. And I was one of the PKD Voices stories a couple of years ago as well.
Okay, and that, by the way, that link's in the comments too.
Oh, it is. So
yes, sir.
That was So I certainly have to thank Jeff for that. He's been extremely helpful. But one of the things I want to mention quickly is that early on in my campaign, I have to admit there was a little bit of discomfort on pursuing a campaign. It just didn't strike me initially as something I was really comfortable to do, to put out there my personal problems and what I'm suffering from and asking people for help and so on. But I realized that's you have to put yourself out there, and you have to provide that visibility, or nothing's going to happen. It took a little bit of, a little while for me to get comfortable with it, but eventually, as you take those first few steps, and you start posting things on Facebook, and one thing leads to another. Then eventually I became more and more comfortable. I'm sure initially, at the very beginning, I never would have envisioned that I would have been able to do this. But, I'm certainly appreciative of having the opportunity to do it. So it's, I guess, kind of, it's just, another point I wanted to make just before I forget. One of the points that a number of people, including my wife, Irene, makes this point to me all the time. The material, we talk about what materials I have in my campaign. And apparently I look too happy and I look too healthy. And I do get a lot of comments. And people are, even for my car, for the car magnets, the signs I have, people will look at them and go, is that for you? I thought that was for a friend or for a family member or something, because you look too healthy. You don't need a kidney, do you? And so this whole message of, the whole message of it's an invisible disease needs to get out there somehow. It's sort of hard to balance. Yes, it's to get the message across that it's the kind of disease that you're healthy until you're not. You're healthy until the end stage, until those last few minutes, until your body can't keep you healthy. It's that invisible disease idea, but I've had that. So, people tell me that and I think Irene probably suggested this as well, that I should redo all my campaign material and I should look a lot less healthy.
Well, they always say to us, don't they, David, you look okay to me.
Well, thank you.
Right. You look fine. So you're not alone in that, my friend. There's a lot of us that have PKD that have heard that talk. So that's why we're doing this.
Exactly. Yes.
Let's talk about where you're listed. I have you listed at the Ottawa Hospital Living Kidney Donor Program.
Yes.
Is that correct?
That is correct.
And the phone number there is 613-738-8400, extension 82719, streaming across your screen as we speak.
There it is.
613-738-8400, extension 82719. The link to that hospital is also in the comments. Tell us a little bit about why you selected that particular spot.
Well, the Ottawa Hospital is the primary hospital where I've been receiving most of my care over all of these years. That's where my nephrologists are today, and that really, it's just the major center here in Ottawa where you would follow up for for kidney disease. Just from my regular visits with my nephrologist, they were the ones who pointed out that's the organization that I should be working with to, for transplantation and so on. That's just the main site, I guess, here in Ottawa. I'm not sure if maybe there's other locations I could have pursued, but that's really kind of, we have three major. Well, the Ottawa Hospital is actually divided up into three major campuses here, and each one of them has different involvement in transplantation and so on. But collectively, that's the overall biggest. That's the main organization to be involved in.
Okay.
So I don't think I really consciously made the decision to join them. I think they just told me to. They told me to join them.
To join up, okay.
Just join up.
Let's talk about. Have you had any challenges, or roadblocks, or difficulties with your health while waiting for a kidney transplant? How long have you been waiting so far?
Well, the interesting thing about roadblocks and so on is that, it's because I'm currently at 17%, or at least I was, a couple of months ago. We'll see where I am next month. And I'm trying to motion to get the pre-transplant assessment tests started. And some of the feedback I was getting, they were telling me, they didn't really want to start those tests yet, because I need to drop a little bit further, a few more points, maybe down to whatever, 14, 15% or something. And I'm thinking, well, this kind of strikes me as defeating the purpose of preparing for a preemptive transplant. You want to be assessed and ready to go as soon as possible. Now, I understand as well, in all fairness, there's a lot of other people who are in a similar boat, and you don't want to, I don't want to jump the queue or anything, but the whole concept of doing the tests, I mean, that's not interfering with anybody else getting a transplant who's maybe in a worse condition right now. It's just starting the test, because it takes 6 or 12 months to do all these tests. They're really well spread out quite a way. So it's not really, it doesn't strike me as causing anyone else any difficulty just to begin doing the tests. So I had a bit of a challenge trying to convince my the medical team, my nephrologist, to start the test. But then last year, we had a situation where a friend of ours, her brother, suffered a major cardiac event, and he was only being kept alive so they could decide who was going to get his organs. And the family contacted me, and they really wanted me to have one of his kidneys. Well, of course, that's an absolute non-starter, because I hadn't at that point begun the pre-transplant assessment test. So, and of course, taking 6 or 12 months, so that's just not going to happen. So I brought that to the attention of, the team. And I said, it's very unfortunate that this happened. And I'm very glad that other people were able to, be saved and benefit from his organs. But if I had my tests done and ready to, and I'd been given the green light and the stamp of approval, I mean, maybe there would have been, an option for me to, receive that kidney as per the family's wishes. So I think that was kind of that was kind of what turned it around. And then at that point, they said, okay, we don't want you to miss future opportunities. I think it probably does make sense for you to be prepared. And so then they started the tests. We also just had another friend, pass away just a month or so ago. But this person was living in Miami, so there was some complications there. That was a whole other issue. But it's very sad that it's great that when people, we're seeing, when people do die, that they're able to, how many people they can save with their death. But you really, I guess, from my point of view, you need to be prepared and ready to receive a transplant when that opportunity comes. So yeah, that was a bit of a challenge, a bit of a roadblock, but eventually it got turned around.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about the differences between the Canadian kidney transplant system and the transplant system here in the United States. Can you tell us a little bit about what you know about the differences?
Yeah, that's interesting. There's now, of course, I'm not an expert on the Canadian system from the point of view that I'm a patient involved in using the system as opposed to an administrator or somebody who is involved in the management of it. But I do certainly know a few things that I've looked into over the years. I guess what I would probably mention at first is who's running our transplant system. Well, that's under the Canadian Blood Services Organization here in Canada, which is part of the Red Cross. And of course, they've had the responsibility for years of controlling our blood supply. Our blood supply. So people that obviously in need of blood for surgery and so on. So they have and still do have that mandate. And a few years ago, what was that, 6 or 7 years ago or something? Previously, the governing body or the overseeing body for transplantation here in Canada, I believe, and somebody may correct me if please, if I make mistakes, but that was, see if I can remember the name here now. It was the Canadian Council for Donation and Transplantation, the Canadian Council for Transplant. For donation and transplantation. I think they had the oversight they had the responsibility for the program for 6 or 7 years, something like that. And then as a council, they were in a position, to make certain decisions and so on. But where rubber hits the road, I guess, to actually manage the program, the operational side of it, it seemed to make more sense for it to be run under the Canadian Blood Services, under our Canadian Red Cross. So it got moved over to their mandate. And I believe, it certainly was a couple of years ago. I don't know if that's changed, when governments change, but it should still be under them. Now they maintain a number of different. This is where it's going to start getting interesting. They maintain a number of different lists, donor lists and recipient lists, and they categorize it. They've got intended intended donors and potential donors and actual donors. So these are all separate lists. And an intended donor being somebody, well, you've expressed an interest in that you want to donate, but you haven't been assessed, or you haven't, a medical team hasn't evaluated yet to see if you're a viable candidate. So you're just sitting in this list as, well, I wouldn't mind being able to donate. So maybe I'm thinking, what's the purpose of that one? Well, maybe then we can start encouraging those people to actually get assessed and then to move over to the next list, which is the potential donor list. And those are the people who have had some assessment and are deemed to be viable candidates, to donate. So that's your most important list for donation. And then we have, the actual one. Well, if you're a living donor and you've donated, you get listed on the actual list. And even if you're deceased and you've donated, you're on that actual donor list. I'm thinking, well, that's kind of interesting. I mean, if you're still alive, maybe there's value there, because maybe you gave a kidney at one point, and if you're still alive, maybe you'd be interested in giving a lobe of your liver or something else. I guess there's value to keep track of those. If you were a deceased donor, I'm not quite sure why we really put so much effort into tracking those people, because you're not going to go and get any further donations from a deceased donor. But I guess it's just valuable, maybe so you can thank the family in perpetuity or something. But we have those kind of lists. Those are interesting. But where it gets a bit disjointed, and well, maybe I hope that's not too harsh of a word, but here in Canada, most of our donor lists are handled, it's a national list, national donor list. And that's great. And that's the way it should be, all in one-stop shopping. But our recipient lists are handled provincially. We have 10 provinces, 3 territories. So you've got 13 lists, separate lists of potential, of people waiting for a donation. And you've got one central national list of available donors. So you can see how this might become a little bit difficult to kind of administer here, because everything's based on a prioritization criteria basis. So you've got all these different people who are waiting for a kidney in all these different provinces, much like you would have in your different states. And so I might be in, say Quebec. That's one of our, and you go in and you're trying to look for a donor in the national donor list, and then somebody's from Manitoba and they're looking for somebody, looking for a donor, and somebody from Saskatchewan or Alberta or BC or all these from. So you're all going to the same donor list, and you're trying. How do you maintain the prioritization of who has the highest priority to receive the donors from the central repository? Like, how do these individual provincial lists talk to each other and figure out prioritization? Now that leads me to, because I tend to think we probably need something, and I probably get a phone call from somebody here in Canada saying don't knock our system, but I look at your, what is it? I think it's your United Network for Organ Sharing, UNOS.
UNOS, yeah.
UNOS. And that's, if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, please, but I believe, that's where you've got, that's a national database with all of your potential donors and potential recipients. It's all kind of one-stop shopping in one place. So it's so much easier to maintain the prioritization system and the criteria to say who is at the top of the list, who has the highest priority to receive, and you can, it's easier to balance that out. But when you're dealing with 10 different lists from 10 different provinces and 3 different territories, it just kind of strikes me that it's maybe a little more complex and confusing than it needs to be. So if I had any recommendation, I would sort of suggest maybe we need to unify these recipient wait lists into one big national list, similar to what you have with UNOS. But that said, it gets even more interesting, because here in Canada, we also have a bunch of other lists, and I think most of these are maintained again under the Canadian Blood Services. But we have something called, we have the Kidney Paired Donor Exchange Registry. So that makes a lot of sense. That is a separate registry again from all the ones I just mentioned, but that's a national one. So that has all the donors and all the potential recipients who are involved in the paired exchange program. So that makes sense, but it's also separate from the regular registries of trying to find a donor. But if you're just involved in the paired exchange program, well, then it's great that everything's in one place there. Then we have something called the National Organ Wait List. Well, that sounds promising. The there's the word national. That sounds like now we're all going in the right direction. So you've got the national organ wait list. And well, what's that all about? Well, that's wonderful. And it does have all of the donors and potential donors, and it has all of the people waiting for a transplant. Unfortunately, it's for people looking for an organ other than a kidney. So it's for all the other organs. So now you've got a whole other process, database, administration, everything handling these other lists that have everything that are there for transplants other than kidneys. So I say to myself, well, why do we do that? Why do we separate kidneys off for that list? And maybe it's because kidneys are the most commonly, the most widely needed, or it's the high, it's the one organ that's needed the most, I guess. So maybe the administrative difficulty of managing it, they try to keep it separate, but still, it just seems to be an interesting extra layer, administrative layer here in Canada to separate, every other organ from kidneys. And then, of course, we have another list. Now it's called the highly, what one is that? That's the highly sensitized patient list, and that's similar to the other lists, except that's for people who have highly sensitized immune systems. So now I have to say to myself, well, how do you get on that list? How do you evaluate? How do you determine somebody has a higher priority for a transplant? How do you know that they're immune? How do you evaluate? I don't know what the evaluation process is to say. Well, you have a much more sensitized immune system than everybody else. So you get on a special list. You get on the first list maybe as well, and maybe some of these other lists, but you get a special list as well because, I guess, having a highly sensitized immune system, I guess there's only now there's only a subset of potential donors that could help you. So there's that. I said, okay, that must be about the end of it. That's got to be about then all the lists that we have. No. Now we have another one called the Living Donor Registry. Well, that sounds promising again, a living donor registry. And that, so why would I go to that one? Well, then I look. You look at that one, and that virtually has nothing to do with organ donation. That's if you're looking for bone marrow or sources for stem cells. So that's a whole other thing going on there. So so I don't know, particularly in America, how many, how it's all broken up into different registries and lists and so on. But I'll come back to you've got your United Network for Organ Sharing, UNOS. And that seems to make an awful lot of sense. It looks like one-stop shopping, everything in one place. That's terrific. And maybe we could learn a little something, from America in that sense. But so there we are. It sounds like an awful lot to manage.
Okay. What is the average wait time in Canada for a kidney?
That's a very good question. And I should know that. I believe you're looking at... I've heard a couple of different numbers. But it could be anywhere from like 3 to 5 years, something. It depends on the province as well. I understand that Quebec is a little bit faster. Our Quebec province, maybe a year quicker. Ontario, where I live, has the most number of people looking for organs, and so it slows it. Obviously the time's going to take a little bit longer. 3 to 5 years, I've heard quite a few, quite often. And of course, for a deceased, often I think that's for a deceased donor. I mean, naturally, if you have a living donor, well, of course, I mean, that's very quick. They can organize the transplant very, very quickly. What do I mean by very quickly? How much? You don't. From what we had a friend who just recently had a transplant. He got a donation from his sister. So having a living donor, I mean, it struck me that was set up very quickly, just in a matter of, I mean, she had to go through some tests as well, but as soon as the tests were completed, the transplantation was done right away, very fast.
Okay. David, just for the record, what is your blood type?
A positive. A positive. So, and of course, luckily O is a universal donor, so it doesn't have to be just an A positive donor. It could be
an A or an O?
An A or an O. A or no would work, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about your kidney advocacy experience. And in particular, let's talk about the tolvaptan trial that you were involved in Montreal for a 6 or 7 year period. What was that like?
Yeah, that's That was, I'm sorry, I was just trying to think of the year now. Yeah, that dates back that's about 13 years. That's about 13 years ago. My nephrologist at the time had identified that there was a study going on, and that one of the chapters of that study was out of Montreal. So that's a couple of 100 kilometers from here. Well, it's so a round trip. It's about 400 kilometers. Well, it's about 250 miles. Put it into miles. It's about 250 miles round trip each time. But I was very lucky there. As I said, my nephrologist identified that there was a study of this new drug called Jynarque, which is really actually a variation of tolvaptan. Tolvaptan was originally used for cardiac events, to try and eliminate some of the fluid buildup around the heart and so on. And then this wonderful company, Otsuka, out of Japan, was working on a variation of it, and they called it Jynarque. And so the whole idea was to eliminate some of the fluid buildup in the cysts of the kidney. So it seemed to be a great idea. And anyway, so I just luckily squeezed in because I was getting close to 50 at that time, and because I'm 63 now. And so I just squeezed in, I applied and just made it in. And then, so for the next, it was about 7 years, going back and forth to Montreal, again, round trips, winter, summer, whatnot, for MRIs and all the different tests and all the rest of it. But unfortunately, I was on the placebo for the first 3 years, but that's a part of the being a double-blind study. You're not supposed to know whether you have the active drug or not. But for me, it was extremely apparent very quickly that I was not on the active ingredient, because the symptoms of tolvaptan are that you're going to have increased thirst and increased urination and all the rest of it, and none of that had changed. So it was sort of like wink, wink, nudge, nudge, to my nephrologist. Well, I think we all know I'm on the placebo here, but no, I can't say anything, But I wasn't concerned about that. I mean, the major, the wonderful thing was to be able to participate in that study, and it was great as the years went by to see that the drug was actually demonstrating some efficacy in slowing down and mitigating the progression of the cyst growth and so on. So it was wonderful to be part of that research. And then after 3 years, everybody on the study who was on a placebo got switched over to the active drug. So I was able to benefit from that a little bit earlier than the general population as well. But even today, I started the study 13 years ago, but even today, I still make annual visits to Montreal to visit Dr. Bichet, who was heading that chapter, and his team. Dr. Bichet always likes to keep in touch with his trial patients and see how they're doing and so on, and that's terrific. So every year I still go back and say hi, and see he's doing other studies as well. So it's nice to see what's happening with new developments and so on. And so yeah, I was very, very happy to be part of the Jynarque study. I guess as far as my overall campaign or advocacy rather, I take advantage of the opportunity. It's interesting. Once I started putting a kidney campaign together, and I became more visible, with signs on my car, and we looked at some of the material I hand out, and people started asking me questions. And I said, what's this all about? Kidney donation. And I don't really know a lot about that. What can you tell me? And so I take every opportunity to talk to people. And it's amazing that a lot of people are not really aware that you can live a perfectly normal life with one kidney. And so I like to help people understand about what is it like, what's the process that you would have to go through for donation. And I mean there's certain tests and assessments that you have to do as well. What's that all about? How does that work? You're going to live, how long does it take to recover? Life is perfectly normal with one kidney. Actually, the one kidney that remains, actually in some cases enlarges a little bit and gets a little stronger and starts taking over some of the duty of in lieu of the one that's missing. So I take every opportunity to help educate people on what transplantation is all about. And it's amazing how many people. I mean, it's wonderful to see how many people become interested, take an interest in what is, who never before really thought about it at all. And it's just all of a sudden, well, wow, I saw your sign on your car, and now I have some questions. And so, take the time to answer those. Also, with respect to advocacy, I've really done a lot of research over the years on alternative therapies. You really have to be very proactive on this. When you start talking about alternative therapies, I mean, you look at the simple things of diet and exercise and so on. But then, things like getting your body into a state of ketosis, for instance, generating ketones, which is a more natural form of a naturally generated form of energy for your body to burn, as opposed to, the typical carbohydrates that we all burn from food. So looking into, what are the benefits of getting into like a keto type diet? And now, of course, a keto diet, if you don't, depending on how you do it, I mean, for the most part, it's all healthy fats and meats and stuff. So it may not necessarily be the most healthy diet. You've got to be careful how you do it. But, that led me into looking into different approaches to these things. I got interested in, for instance, Dr. Weems out of the University of California, Santa Barbara. He's been doing a lot of work on ketosis and how that affects. Now, of course, that's with animal models, rats and cats and mice and whatever. But he's actually demonstrated some very significant, efficacy of putting people on putting the animal models on into a state of ketosis, and it's not only mitigated the growth of the kidneys, the cysts rather, but in some cases he actually shows that it's partially reversed or shrunk the size of the cyst. So you say, but you've got to be really proactive in pursuing all of these things, because well, certainly here in Canada, and I imagine it's somewhat applicable to the States as well, is that there's a prescribed course of therapy that physicians have to follow. They're not allowed to suddenly say, well, wait a minute, no, we can go and let's try you on this or try you on that. I mean, for the last number of decades, what was that prescribed course of therapy? Well, it was just observe, monitor, measure, until, of course, Genard came along, and then there was one active ingredient to put you on, and that helps a little bit. But they're never really at liberty to or weren't anyway in the past, to say, well, hey, what do I have this idea about, there's this business of ketosis and keto diets and, intermittent fasting. And, maybe if you don't eat breakfast until noon, that's going to give your body an opportunity to generate ketones and do this and do that. So you really have to be proactive and pursue these things yourself. So that I do. And in looking into those, of course, you're talking to a lot of other people, getting their ideas and their input, sharing those ideas about, have you tried this? Have you tried that? What have you found? And, so you get a whole community of information exchange going on those ideas. Well, actually, it's that's all in speaking about PKD. I should just back up a little tiny bit. When I first met, when Irene and I got together, actually, I probably did more advocacy we did more advocacy probably for multiple sclerosis than PKD back then, because, I think back then I thought MS was going to be the disease that was going to cause me the most harm. And now, as it turns out, I think, certainly MS is not going to be the one that's going to be, cause me the most grief. It's going to be PKD, obviously, because I'm very close now to losing, not that far from renal failure. But we got involved in a lot of charity activities, fundraisers and so on for MS back then. We did bike tours, Irene with her businesses and creating quilts and all that. We had auctions of quilts. I had auctioned some of my paintings, raising funds, raising awareness, through doing that. And also because my wife's brother's wife, her sister-in-law, also has MS, and she's been very, very harshly impacted by that disease. And, so that was, that strongly encouraged us to do back then, to do as much as we could to contribute to the MS cause. But, now, I mean, from my point of view, for myself personally, yes, now, PKD is going to be the biggest problem for me. But, so yeah, try to reach out and share information and do as much advocacy as possible. And of course, if I'm lucky enough to get a new kidney, well, that'd be great. Then it can continue doing a lot of things. We have a lot of plans in the future. And of course, it'd be nice to be able to continue to contribute to, these causes as well as we can going forward, which would be a lot easier if you're, up and around and healthy and not chained to a machine.
Okay. We're in the home stretch here, David. In closing, is there anything that you would like to say? Is there anything that I missed that you would like to talk about?
Oh, thank you. No, I think, we've covered quite a bit. I think the most, I really just want to thank everyone and thank you very much, Uncle Jim, for everything that you have done and do, to help, not only myself, but everybody, make that hope and dream of getting a transplant, that much more of a reality. So I certainly appreciate that. Thank you very much. And, if I was going to leave anybody with, maybe kind of a little bit of a message, from my own personal experience, it's if you get a diagnosis of something like polycystic kidney disease, and maybe it's partly something, the foolishness of youth perhaps, but don't let it hold you back. Don't let it ruin your life. Don't think the worst. It's not a death sentence. There's don't jump the gun. And that I made a lot of decisions based on what I thought would or might happen. And that, I would say, like, wait until things do happen, before you make such drastic radical changes in your life. See the glass half full, be optimistic, always keep a positive attitude, and just march forward bravely and do the best you can. Carry on with your plans and your dreams. And when things happen, if they turn for the worse, well, you deal with it at that time. But, don't do what I did and make some really foolish decisions just on what you thought might happen. Stay positive.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, I can't tell you how much we appreciate you coming on tonight, David, and educating us, talking to us about PKD and your experiences and what's going on with the Canadian transplant system. These are all first for our broadcast, and I'm hopeful that we're going to raise a little awareness tonight in the PKD community, and I'm equally hopeful that this will somehow help you to find that living donor that you're looking for. You will keep us posted, right?
I will indeed. Absolutely. Yes. Every step of the way.
All right. I'm going to let you go, David. I got some announcements to make about future broadcasts, that sort of thing. I just want you to know I really appreciate your help in coming on and speaking to us tonight. Best wishes to you and to your wife, Irene.
Oh, thank you so much. Now I just have to figure out how to sign off. we had a little bit of a technical glitch at the beginning there. I think I'm just going to close this laptop, and that should probably, maybe that'll do it.
That should do it, David.
Let's see what happens. Okay, here, I'm going to close it. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye, everyone.
Have a good night. All right, everybody. That was David Lafleche talking to us about polycystic kidney disease and what's going on in Canada with the kidney transplant system. Let's talk a little bit about some upcoming broadcasts. The 2nd of September, Kayla Yoakum is coming on with us to talk about her issues with kidney disease. The 9th of September, Merle Uranga, Uranga, is coming on. She's a kidney cancer patient. That'll be a first for us. We're going to talk a little kidney cancer with somebody who's experiencing it. 9/16, we're going to talk to Shane Moore and Michelle Resendez, kidney transplant patient, early rejection issues, and a new product, Omograph, that helps detect those issues. The 23rd of September, we're going to be talking to Willie Blackwell, former NFL player, people ministry, and Willie's just been transplanted. So a lot of ground to cover there with a really good guy. So I'm looking forward to that conversation. On the 30th, we're talking to Kelsey Reed. She's a certified medical nutritionist. So get all your questions ready about what we can and can't eat and what we should be doing. She's very good at answering those, by the way. And I'm looking forward to having that broadcast with her. On the 7th of October, we're talking to Dr. Sheenan Moe, M-O-A. She's going to talk to us about transplants in children. I have a soft spot for pediatric kidney patients, so I want to get as much information about that out to you. On the 14th of October, Dr. Christian Hanna's coming on. He's a peds doctor from the Mayo Clinic. He's going to talk about PKD issues in children, medication, things of that nature. On the 21st, making her return visit, our good friend Risa Simon's going to come on. She has a new application for kidney patients. She's kind of excited about it. She's got me a little fired up, so we're going to talk about that. And on the 28th of October, Lainey Escobar is going to come on. Lainey is a PKD champions advocate, so we're going to talk about what's going on with the PKD champions, about a little PKD advocacy and the PKD Foundation. So watch this space because Uncle Jim's got some interesting things for you. All right. You guys have a good night, and I will see you soon. Take care, my friends.